Okay, so I am in the process of making a Thayer jacket by Grainline Studio. This is sort of like a workwear inspired jacket, a chore coat style, if you will. And I decided that I wanted my lining to be removable. So what I am going to do in order to make that happen is to draft a separate facing and lining from just the lining pieces. The way the pattern is currently drafted is the lining goes all the way up to and stitches into the edge of the jacket here. So there are no facings. It's completely enclosed into the neckline. It's drafted to be sewn with like a shearling lining or something like that. That'll have some contrast in the collar as well. While I am going to do some contrast, I want this to be sort of a multi-season coat, so I am going to create a removable lining. I will have to order a very long zipper, but I just wanted to show you guys how I am drafting that and changing the pattern in order to accommodate for this lining. So what I have here are my two lining pieces. This is the front lining and this lining. And as you can see, I've drawn in a line here and here that show where my new facing piece, my new seam line for the facing to lining seam. So I want my facing to be decent and wide. There are going to be buttons or snaps going here, so you want to make sure there's room for that. So I made a 2.5 inch facing, and basically to do that you just draw a line 2.5 inches away from the outer edge and follow your curve here, and then I kind of blend it in. You don't really want to come to a corner, especially since I'm going to be doing a zipper. Let me get a ruler so I can illustrate this better for you. Instead, I traced a line that was 2.5 inches. I followed it here around the neckline, and then I followed it here all the way up the front. And that caused me to have a point right here, but I don't want a point right here. I'm going to be putting a zipper in. So from somewhere around here where this curve is and somewhere in here, I just created this curved line. So I have a much prettier shaped facing there. The back is a little more simple. I just created a line 2.5 inches away from the neckline, and this will be cut on the fold. So it's not enough just to trace our new seam line. You then need to actually create the new pattern pieces. So starting with the front, what I did was on pattern paper, I then traced my new pattern pieces. So I now have a front lining piece and a front facing piece. And the important thing when you do this is that you are tracing, as you can see, I'm tracing this line, which then becomes this inner line. This is my stitch line. Now you don't want to forget to add your seam allowance, otherwise whenever you put it all together it won't fit. So I recommend working with whatever seam allowance the pattern comes with. Grainline uses 1/2 inch, which is awesome. That's the seam allowance I like to use. You also want to make sure you are transferring your grain line and your notches, because you want everything to still fit together how it's supposed to. So as you can see, once again, I'm going to pull this down so you can see at the shoulder. This is my stitch line. I traced this and all of the outer edges onto tracing paper, and then I went in and added a seam allowance only along my new stitch line. These lines of the outer edge of the pattern already have seam allowance, so I don't need to add anything there. You're only adding seam allowance to the new stitch line. And I did the same with the front lining piece. Again, transferring my marks, my grain lines, and tracing the stitch line and adding the seam allowance. So whenever I line these up here, you can see through the paper that everything lines up, and I still have a 1/2 inch seam allowance there. Same on the back. This is my new back lining and my back facing piece. I marked where my fold is going to be. This is also the grain line. So this is my back facing piece with the stitch line here, and I added the seam allowance. So I recommend just tracing the new stitch line you want. I like to do this just directly onto the original pattern piece. And then of course you don't want to cut this apart in case you're going to make it the original way at a later date. So I like to trace any changes onto the original pattern piece and then trace new pieces. So when I'm sewing this, my original pattern pieces I won't use. I won't use these two. I'll only use all of my new pattern pieces. So this will be in a facing, and this will get stitched here, and then this and this will get, well, they won't get stitched together because there'll be a zipper. So I'm going to measure this stitch line and this stitch line, add those together, multiply it times 2, and this will be a very long zipper that goes all the way around the inside of the jacket. Of course, it'll need to be custom ordered, and it'll be a separating zipper so that I can sew this lining in a thick flannel that I have, and this facing will just be in a denim, a contrast denim to what my jacket will be, and I will then be able to take out my lining whenever I want. For the sleeves, I am just going to cut the sleeve as it calls for in the pattern for the sleeve lining. For the sleeve, on this, the way this pattern works is the pattern piece for the sleeve and the sleeve lining is the same. You're just cutting a shorter line, a shorter mark. And what I think happens, there's some notches down here. I think this gets folded up. So the sleeve lining gets cut here, that's the raw edge. And then I think the self gets folded up and then under and top stitched, and the lining is down in here. What I'll probably do is just fold the self up and under and stitch it, fold the lining, give it a smaller hemline, and put a button and buttonhole inside the sleeve to connect the sleeve to the lining to keep the lining in place whenever I have the lining on. So I will show you guys the result when I get to that point, but I just wanted to show you, for those who are curious, how I drafted for the body, the facing, and the lining pieces from the original lining pieces. Now nothing on the self fabric will change. This is only changing the lining. So I hope that is helpful, and let's see how the construction turns out. Okay, now that I've shown you how to draft the lining, removable lining for the Thayer jacket, I'm going to talk you through the construction. I did not film this as I went. I apologize for that, but I do want to sort of talk you through it so that you're not completely left hanging. So I have the pieces separate for this demonstration. So the first thing you want to do is connect your facings together at the shoulder seams, and you're also going to sew together the remaining lining pieces as per the instructions. Nothing crazy about that. That's all pretty normal. So then once you have your facing pieces connected and your lining piece connected, you're going to follow the instructions for connecting the lining to the jacket at the center front where the opening is. For just the facing piecing. The facing gets connected to the jacket just like the lining in the pattern does, except you want to skip anything that involves the hem. So whenever they connect the lining to the jacket around the hem, we're not doing that. So follow the instructions to connect the lining to the jacket using your facing pieces only. And then the next thing you're going to do is attach your zipper, which is a little scary, but it's not too scary. You are going to need a lining zipper for this. If I can find it, I will link below the exact one I got. It's nice and long, it's separating, and it's pretty, it's not super stiff, so it goes around all these curves really nicely. So just start with one side of your zipper, and you want the separator, where it separates, to line up right where the front of the jacket is going to fold up and hem. So with our jacket, instead of the lining and the self being connected at the bottom, you're going to hem them independently of each other. So this gets an inch hem turned twice. So like fold up an inch and then fold up an inch and then stitch. I did that last because I wanted to be able to access this corner easily. So you don't need to do the hem yet, but you want to start the facing, you want to start the zipper separator where you will be able to access it above that hemline. So essentially 2 inches above the raw edge of the jacket. And just stitch the zipper on that's connected to the jacket first. I found that really helpful. And I just stitched it flat like this. I don't know how well you can see. Well, it's folded back, but as if it were, let me scoot up a little bit. I serged all of my raw edges. This pattern does not use serging, but since you are going to be wearing this separate, you do want to serge all your raw edges. And I just lined up my zipper to the end of that raw edge, actually a little bit in, because you want your stitch of your zipper to hit that 1/2 inch seam line mark, because we added a 1/2 inch of seam allowance to our facing pattern. So I stitched the zipper, I stitched it all the way around, and then before doing any top stitching, I wanted to stitch my zipper to my lining piece. Now, before you do this, I want you to zip up the zipper separately and give yourself some notches. So I zipped the other half of the zipper onto the zipper that I already sewed on here, and I made a notch on the actual zipper tape. Let me see if you can still see any of my notches. No. I made a notch on the actual zipper tape just with chalk of where the shoulder seam is. I made a notch of where this front cross, wait, no, where is it? This cross seam is right here, the yoke, the front yoke, onto the the side of the zipper that's going to go to your lining. So zip it all up, make those notches, and that's going to help you ensure that when you zip this all together, everything is lining up where it's supposed to. So you've got your notches on your zipper. Now this piece is a little more arbitrary because we haven't done our hem on it yet, so you aren't really sure where the separator needs to start. And just for note, I put the side of the zipper with the pull on it on my jacket lining side. So our jacket lining, since the lining pieces are cut an inch shorter than the self pieces, that only gets serged and folded up once, 1 inch hem. So you are going to essentially start your zipper separator on the lining piece 1 inch up from the raw edge, and then you should be able to line up all, you can go ahead and pin in place, line up your notch to match your shoulder seam and wherever else your notch to match that front yoke is, and stitch the zipper on, being sure that those notches line up. Now, same as before, I stitched this zipper on flat and I did a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the zipper. Next, try it out. Zip it all up, see if it works. Before you do any top stitching on your zipper, you want to make sure it's all lined up so you're not taking out anything twice. And on my case, the zipper was a little bit longer than I needed, so I just folded it, I clipped it below where I needed it, folded it back, and stitched it back, and that keeps the pull from flying off of your jacket because it's not going to go around that curve. So after you zip it up, make sure everything lines up good, and then you can do your top stitching. So the zipper it goes on flat like this, and then you want to fold it back to get that raw edge out of the way so you have a nice clean line with your zipper teeth there, and do a top stitching about 1/4 inch away from the fold where your fabric meets the zipper, and that is not only going to give you a nice clean line, but it's also going to hold any fabric bulk, especially if you're doing a thick lining like this, any fabric bulk away from the zipper. And then you're pretty much just hemming. So you're going to do that 1 inch double fold hem on the hem of the jacket. On the sleeve of the jacket, instead of doing a double fold, I wanted to do a chunkier hem, so I just did 2 inches flat without folding. The edges are serged, and I stitched that down. Again, all of my edges insides are serged because these are separating. So the actual jacket pattern doesn't call for any serging because it's all enclosed with the lining. This pattern, this method, you want to serge everything. So on the lining, these are again 1 inch shorter than the actual jacket, so I just folded up 1 inch and stitched one time on the sleeve and the hem. And then you are, I did this after I had already connected the collar and stuff. So again, the collar and all that, you're just going to connect to the facing as if it is the lining of the jacket. I did that, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. I did that after I did connected the facing to the center front of the jacket. I went ahead and moved forward and connected all of my collar pieces as well. And then that's it. That is how you have a removable jacket lining for your Thayer jacket. Is there any other questions you have? Please let me know in the comments below. Oh, one more thing. If you want, you can stitch a button on the inside of your jacket sleeve and a buttonhole on the inside of your lining sleeve to keep them from getting twisted and stuff. I haven't had a problem with that yet, and that lining is so thick that I just don't I don't think I'm going to need to do that. I'm going to give it a couple wears first just to see, but if you wanted to secure that lining to the sleeve hem, you could do a button and buttonhole. Just remember that the buttonhole is going in your lining piece and the button is going on the inside of your jacket piece. So I hope that I was able to describe that in a way that makes sense to you. I'm happy to answer any more questions you have. Please let me know in the comments below. If you use this hack, please let me know. Tag me so I can see it. I cannot wait to see all your Thayer jackets, and happy sewing! Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you learned something today. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below if there are any other tutorials you would like to see in the future. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my future videos by clicking this button right here. And you can check out my other tutorials in my tutorial playlist right here. I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye!